Hello and welcome to today's Metro Incident Management Team training. Today we will be discussing the planning section and the resource unit. In particular, we'll be discussing the check-in process. The resource unit leader and status check-in recorder play a key role in the success of the incident, and a large part of that role is checking in. Check-in sets the incident up for success or adversity. It impacts the safety, finance, and record-keeping functions, just to name a few. The following is an example of the significance of checking in. A small town had a major flood that caused $60 million in damages. The federal disaster response called for a 75-25 split in costs. The town's annual budget was only about $7 million, but they needed to contribute $15 million towards the disaster response. At check-in, every volunteer checked in. The town was able to use volunteer time as in-kind contributions. Volunteers were assigned a labor rate. These volunteer hours helped the town to make up their 25%. This was a huge help to a community in recovery, and it was the status check-in recorder's job to capture it. Seeing that all incident resources are properly checked in is the first priority of the resource unit. Check-in should be established as early as possible at the incident site. It's very important to clearly mark check-in locations with signs. Signs can make the work a lot faster and clear up a lot of confusion. Consider whether a status check-in recorder will be able to be at all check-in locations. If not, the staging area manager or division supervisor may end up gathering check-in information. Regardless of staffing, the right questions must be asked. The resource unit leader should use all available resources. For example, the local Department of Transportation may have a light-up message boards that could very clearly mark those check-in locations, the incident command post, and so forth. The resource unit leader or status check-in recorder could also use a marker board or spray paint on a very large piece of plywood. So, what type of things should we consider when choosing a check-in location? Well, first, you need to be able to coordinate with the logistics section, and if possible, locate the check-in station near the flow of traffic and the entrance to the incident. Ensure that the check-in station does not impede the flow or traffic. Make sure that the area is protected from rain, sun, and wind. All hazards means all weather also. Be aware that locating the check-in station close to the roads might be noisy. Consider the ease of communication with other ICS personnel, either electronically or face-to-face. You should also consider the advantages and disadvantages of co-locating with the resource or demobilization unit. Remember traffic flow. You should provide easy ingress and easy egress. You should also provide for an overflow or waiting area. The ICS Form 211 is critical to the success of any incident. Every member of the Metro Incident Management Team should be familiar with this important document, regardless of their position on the team. The ICS Form 211 not only gathers critical information, but it also assists in the processes of accountability and planning and demobilization. This list is also important in keeping track of the arrival times of all overhead personnel and equipment, recording the initial location of personnel and equipment, and supporting demobilization by recording the home base, method of travel, and so forth for all resources checking in. The ICS Form 211 sometimes can seem cumbersome and difficult to navigate. We'll get more into the nuts and bolts of this important document in our next training session. Another important component of the check-in process is resource typing. The purpose of resource typing is to define the resources. It may not tell you the exact sizes, but it will have minimums. Resource typing helps responders get the resources that they really need. Your definition of a Type 2 dozer may be different than what is in the definition. For example, they may go by horsepower of the motor when you go by something else. When working with these resources, it's important that you work with a supply unit leader on this. It's important to ask the operations section chief exactly what they're looking for. For example, a John Deere D60 is different than a D6. The resource unit leader might add a separate note, such as must exceed a D6 or must have 15 gallon per minute better pump. Understanding resource typing will help you get the resources that you really need. Resource typing definitions provide emergency managers with the information that they need to request and receive resources during the incident. Different organizations have different resource typing definitions. It is important to determine whether your jurisdiction has resource typing. An example of NIMS resource typing can be found on the internet. It's also important that as you get into the process that you work closely with the home agency to understand their resource typing. So who really needs information from the status check-in recorder? Well, as we've discussed, many components of the incident management team need this vital information. In particular, the status check-in recorder needs to provide information to the resource unit leader and the operations section chief. What should the status check-in recorder consider when reporting this information? First, the status check-in recorder must verify the method and frequency of recording check-in information. Remember that the status check-in recorder has to start a new form whenever a new form, such as the ICS Form 213, is sent to the resource unit. Transmittal methods may vary depending on the incident situation and the needs. Some options are runners to pick up, radio, telephone and cell phone, computer or other electronic means, and face-to-face at the incident command post or base. It's important that everyone is on the same page and that the staging manager is giving the operations section chief the same information that the status check-in recorder is. It seems on every incident there are those who self-deploy. Self-deployments can be good or they can be a liability. It's important to understand the following things. Who sent them? Do you need them? Or will you need them later? It's important to understand this also. You need to find out whether self-deployments are to be handled by the status check-in recorder or the liaison officer. The resource unit leader plays a major part in determination of whether to keep the self-deployments. The status check-in recorder has a responsibility to the resource unit leader, and depending on the parameters given in those work tasks. Self-deployments may want to volunteer or charge for their services. It's important to know the process and the requirements for volunteer check-in. Find out the background and the expertise of the self-deployments. Do they bring something valuable that you could use? Consider liability issues also. You need to balance that what they bring to the table with what the potential liabilities are. In every aspect of the incident, there are potential pitfalls. To avoid pitfalls, you may need to take some or all of the following actions. Reduce the number of check-in stations or order more people. Be aware of staff personnel, space, and supply needs. Ensure that check-in stations operate efficiently. Ensure that channels of communication are established. Have an equipment manager inspect equipment prior to check-in. So what are some of the other pitfalls to watch out for? What was ordered may not be the same as what was delivered. The resource unit leader is not responsible for inspection. However, it is the resource unit leader's responsibility to confirm or deny that the equipment has been checked in. For example, you may need to inventory what is actually on an engine. Sometimes resources are discovered to be damaged on arrival. If you notice that you have received damaged resources, call in the responsible party at the incident site. For example, it may be ground support, and they need to conduct an inspection before checking in the resource. Then, The resource can be refused, avoiding potentially costly repairs. The status check-in recorder may also check the qualifications of arriving resources. There may be an insufficient number of status check-in recorders. The span of control may be too large. You may need a remote check-in. There may be breakdown in communications, and always be aware of the self-deployments. This will conclude today's training. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you found it informative. Remember, check-in is everybody's responsibility. Whether you're in the planning section, operations section, finance section, or whether you're some of the boots on the ground, everyone needs to be checked in at the incident. So it's important for us to understand this critical role and responsibility of our incident management team.